Hey guys, it's Danny Lennon here again from Elite Fitness and Performance Academy, and we're here with the third video in this 5-part series, and we're talking about clients who seem to be fat loss resistant and different things that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with these clients. So we already looked at the first two things. One was checking on their actual adherence, and we came up with a little strategy that might be helpful to a few of you. And the second one was we talked a bit about sleep and other chronic stressors that they may have in their life and the impact that may have on their fat loss efforts as well. So the third one then is, once we get past that, what else can we look at? And we have to look at the energy intake. So again, quite simply, we've looked at food quality. You've probably got them eating really good quality food on a consistent basis. They're turning up training, sleep is dialed in, they're actually adhering to the program. So now it's time to maybe focus and look at how many calories they're actually taking in. Before we start getting down into calories and really kind of worrying too much about people counting calories, it's important to point out to clients that our bodies don't follow the simple maths equation we're often taught actually exists. So a simplified version would be if I said to you that eating just 2 carrots a day on top of what you usually eat now would cause you to put on 5 pounds of fat over the next year. Would you think that was something that sounds sane? I don't think so. So that's based on the calories in those 2 carrots would be enough to incur a 5-pound increase in body fat over the course of 12 months if we take that as a surplus in our calorie equation. So we know instinctively that this is not really going to happen. So therefore, the linear kind of, or the normal kind of equation we think of, just calories in versus calories out, kind of breaks down. And so again, most of you out there are probably already at the point where you're stressing to clients, it's not just about eating less and exercising more, it's about eating the right foods and doing the right sort of training. So I think most of you will be on board with this already. And again, there's loads of things to back up this, that it's not just about that calorie number that's important for weight loss. So Dr. Bill Lagakos wrote a book, The Poor Misunderstood Calorie, absolutely fantastic book if anyone wants to pick it up. And he basically talked about these things of how calories, depending on where they're sourced from and once we start eating them and how they're metabolized, are going to have very different effects on body composition. We have other well-known people, for example, Dr. Robert Lustig has often talked about how a calorie is not a calorie, and he has outlined 4 kind of different areas on why they are different. And again, even if we look at the scientific research, there's papers that will tell us this. So 2012, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, there was a paper that looked at 2 diets, both the exact same amount of calories. Both were on a calorie deficit of about 10 to 15%, so traditionally what we look at for weight loss, and they compared what effect that would have on someone's weight loss efforts. And they found that someone that took part in a low-fat diet version of this calorie deficit ended up having a lower resting metabolic rate when they came off the diet. So again, their metabolism had been slowed down, so obviously weight regain was more likely, compared to someone that was on a low carbohydrate diet, actually had a higher resting metabolic rate than the person on the low fat. So again, it just showed how what the diet was actually made up of can have an effect on the weight loss efforts. So it's not straightforward, calories are calories. Similarly, in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, a typical overfeeding study took lean and overweight individuals and they gave them a diet that was 50% more in calories than what they actually naturally consume. So a typical overfeeding study. As we would expect, all of the participants in the study gained a significant amount of weight during the 6 weeks of overfeeding. But what is interesting is that they all had an increased metabolic rate, and their bodies also increased their body heat production. And the reason for this is that the body actually was attempting to match the increase in the energy in that had gone up with the energy going out. So the body wanted to stay at the same body fat. It didn't want to increase it. It wanted to keep this energy balance. So when calories in went up, i.e. the amount of calories taken in food went up, the body tried to compensate by increasing its energy out. So it sped up the metabolism and it increased body heat production. So again, we see it's not just about a simple calories in versus calories out model. But what we do have to keep in mind here is that regardless of all this, there was still a significant amount of weight gained by the participants. So that means that this mechanism where the body tries to match this this surplus of calories coming in by increasing the calories out, it can only do that to a certain point, wherein after that we can override that mechanism and we can actually get fat gain. So it can only do it to a certain point, so we can still get fat gain. So what is all this to say? That when we're talking about fat loss, quite simply, calories do matter. No other way to think about it. If someone is taking in too many calories, regardless of their food quality, regardless of the macronutrient breakdown, they are going to be unable to lose body fat. So what can we do? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Most of you guys will be well able to go and work out calorie intakes or estimated calorie intakes that we get for people, because there's an endless amount of calculators online. Again, just be aware that they are giving you just guideline figures. But again, if we want to work out guideline figures, how many calories can someone need? A very simplified version that I typically use, I'll take someone's body weight in kilograms. For a male, I'll multiply that by 24.2, female by 22. Then we're going to multiply that number by some sort of activity multiplier. So for someone that is not all that active, we'll multiply it by, say, 1.2, 1.3. For someone that's very active, we might multiply it by 1.8, 1.9, or so on. So again, no hard and fast figures, but just we're going to increase that with their activity level. Then from there, we'll factor in their training, and then the final point, we'll take that final calorie number and we'll reduce it by anywhere between 10 to 20%, depending on how aggressive a cut we're going to try and use with the client. So again, you can go into any amount of online calculators that'll do all this for you. And again, remember, it's just giving you a guideline amount, not an exact figure to hit. So what can we do with clients if we suspect it could be a calorie issue? We'll get them to stay eating and training as they normally are, and just for about 3 days, we'll get them to start inputting their food into something like MyFitnessPal. Really simple app to use, absolutely free, so get them to do that. If that is going to be not accessible to certain clients, just get them to write down their food diary, and again, you can pop this into something like MyFitnessPal very easily. When you have the intake for those 3 days, you'll get the calorie number at the bottom. And again, just compare that to what the suggested estimates that you would have worked out from a calorie calculator are. And again, the aim is not for these to hit those numbers exactly, so they don't have to match up, but it's just to see, okay, are they consistently well above the number we need or we expect weight loss to happen at? And if they're, say, for example, 500 calories above those every day, then we know obviously fat loss is not going to be happening. More importantly, if the numbers are very similar to those that were predicted by the calorie calculator and the person is still not losing weight, then that's a really good sign that something else is going on. So it could be a stressor like we talked about, it could be a hormonal imbalance, which we're going to talk about in a later video, or it could be one of the other issues that we're discussing at the moment. So just keep that in mind. Related to calorie intake is the fourth thing, and that's to analyze the macronutrient breakdown. And this is going to be important. So when we're working out those calories, we'll get a list, and typically we'll be able to see where those calories are coming from. So from carbohydrates, from fats, from proteins. And when we get that information can actually tell us a lot in terms of if there's an underlying issue. That macronutrient breakdown in of itself can tell us a few things. So the obvious one that people always go to first, and it's kind of the most stigmatized, is it too high in carbohydrates. Again, there's no real figure on this, and what is too high for one person is not going to be too high for the other. So what you have to remember is take the person into account, take into account their goals, their activity levels, how healthy they are, like do they have any underlying issues, for example, insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, then their carbohydrate intake will come into play. So if we have someone that is insulin resistant and they are getting still a large amount of carbohydrates in the diet, that could be having a knock-on effect that's going to be unhelpful to their weight loss efforts. Something that's not addressed all that often and is really kind of a big issue because most people really overlook it is, has someone been on too low carb a diet for too long a period? And this is something I've seen quite often recently, and it could be people that have been consistently low carbohydrate diets for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And the biggest problem to try and getting these people to realize that the low carb could be a problem is that over the course of that time, they've probably been getting great results. So over that 6-month period, or that 12-month period, or that the last 2 years, they've been on a low carb diet and it's completely transformed them. They have more energy, they've lost a lot of weight, they're a lot more healthy, and they've seen great results. But now, without getting down to that leanness that they actually want, the weight loss has stopped, or even worse, they're actually starting to get some sort of other health issues off it. So if this is the case, this could be typically someone that's been on a low carb diet for too long. And without going into too much of the offshoots of this, it could be something like thyroid production could be downregulated, leptin production could be downregulated. And if these things happen again, then we're going to have a knock-on effect on metabolism and a knock-on effect on ability to lose weight. So again, that could be something where we just want to start cycling in some high carb intakes. Third thing to ask is there adequate protein for that person? So if they have inadequate protein, obviously, especially if they're on a calorie deficit, then it's going to lead to more muscle mass loss as opposed to fat loss. So, and again, in time, if someone's muscle mass goes down, their resting metabolic rate goes down, and also we know it's a predictor of how difficult that person is going to find losing body fat. So obviously, someone that has a higher ratio of lean mass will find body fat loss easier to come by, per se. What's the fat content like? So the most important thing, I suppose, is there adequate fat in the diet to support sex hormone production, to support optimal androgen receptor density on cells, especially if they're doing some sort of weight training. And again, just for general health, we know that adequate fat diet is important in the body. So just look at what the fat content is like. The timing of the macronutrients. This is again just something that you can think about and play around with your clients. We've seen lots of research that suggests that regardless of how many carbohydrates someone's taking over the course of the day, if we just partition most of those or more of them to the evening or latter half of the day, then that seemed to have a beneficial impact on body composition as opposed to having them more spread out or in the first half of the day. So again, if you think this could be something that you could try with a client, again, there seems to be research that this could be helpful for body composition. And then finally, the types of each macronutrient as well. So for example, with fats, if they're getting quite a lot of fat in the diet, is that a high amount from saturated fats, or is it going to be a high amount from polyunsaturated fats? And especially then, you can even break it down further. Are they getting a lot of their fat from omega-6 fats, which are quite pro-inflammatory? And if we have all this inflammation going on, then this could be, again, very detrimental to any weight loss efforts. So that's what we're going to get through today. We've done some calories, we've done some macronutrients. So again, just 2 more things to keep in mind when you're dealing with clients whose fat loss has stalled. In the next couple of videos, we're going to look at something really, really important and probably the most complex of all the things we've looked at. So we're going to look at some hormonal issues, we're going to look at some gut dysfunction. Again, these are probably the keys to understanding how to get any client really through a fat loss plateau. So stick around for video 4 and 5, and hopefully you've got something from this series so far. Talk to you soon.